Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Growers Live. I'm Josh Satin. Excited to be here as always. Really special guest this evening. We have Andrew Manns of Manns Organic, and what a cool farmer. What a cool farm. They have about an acre of greenhouse production and also about 100 acres altogether, growing a wide variety of crops. They're in Alberta, Canada, and man, I'm really excited about that. But a couple quick announcements. First of which is that this is going to be the last Growers Live for a little while. I had realized I hadn't taken a break in a while, and so I'm going to do that. It's been amazing. I've talked to so many growers and industry professionals, and it's been fascinating for me, and I think everyone else out there. And it's been over a year. So it was July of last year. I've been doing this every other Tuesday night without a break. It just happened to even work out over the holidays that it didn't land on holidays. So it's been pretty crazy, pretty awesome. And so I'll be taking a little bit of a break. I'm not sure when we'll start it back up again, but I just have a lot of stuff to do, not just with no-till growers, but just on my own as well. So I also want to remind you that all of these episodes are also available in podcast form. So if you search for Growers Live in a podcast player that you like, it'll be in there too, and all of the video things are still up on YouTube for you to check out. So again, taking a little break after this one, but I'm going to enjoy talking with Andrew tonight, and I want to thank everyone for their support, not just coming in and chiming in, but also, you know, the Patreon members, and you guys know who you are, and all the support over there as well. So really want to thank everybody. So let's get Andrew in here. You guys don't really want to hear me just blabber on, so we'll get Andrew in here. Andrew, good evening.
Hello, how are you?
Good, Andrew. I don't know if I have a little hesitation here, but I can hear you. So, doing great. Thanks for coming on tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. Do you want to just start off and just let everyone know a little bit about who you are, what you do, your farm, those kinds of things, in case people aren't familiar with what you got going on?
Sure, sounds good. So yeah, we're in southern Alberta. We are a mixed vegetable farm, wholesale only. We do not do any farmers markets, no on-farm sales, and that vegetable production is through greenhouse and field crops. We have an acre of heated greenhouse that basically climate controlled. We run that year-round. The production isn't quite year-round, but the greenhouse is in operation year-round. We are running about 35 acres of field vegetable production, and then the rest of the acres in cover crops in preparation for vegetables, and some spring wheat crop for a little bit of commodity crop there. So yeah, a mix of the field crops are garlic, onions, winter squash, and watermelons, cantaloupe. That's the majority of the acres there. We grow a little bit of rhubarb and a few other things that we dabble with, but that's the production crops. The greenhouse production consists of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and a bit of eggplant, as well as some ginger and turmeric interplantings or in some half rows in other areas. So that's kind of the variety. One of the things we like is it's maybe not the variety of a farmer's market grower or, you know, a dedicated market or CSA grower, but for us it's still a fair bit of variety that when we're dealing with grocery stores who are placing orders with us, that we can send a full skid of a mix of products rather than a little bit of something. That's kind of our angle or approach to, is that not all of our eggs are in one basket every year. Is certain new challenges, or some crops do better than others. So I think it's great to be of a mixed approach, right? And even mentally, I think it's a strong point to consider mentally, that we don't just grow one thing, because if you get down in a crop, it's hard on you. And now you walk from one poor crop to the next one that looks good, and you'll feel better again. So you got to take care of the farmer too. I think it's easy to, something I do too much is work too hard, I think.
I think we all do. I think having that variety in terms of just like looking at something else, maybe a slightly different challenge, or I don't know, seasonality, like all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's important to have a little bit of variety. So if people don't know, Andrew, you have an amazing farm because of you have a very different approach, I think, to most people farming your size. So I want to get into some of these details. I don't know where you want to start, but before we do that, can you talk a little bit about like your farm in general? Just because you grew up on this farm, you left to do something else, and then come back and redoing this. So what's been your approach like starting out the farm, and like why an organic farm, why an acre of greenhouse? Like, can you talk a little about the decisions just to like get the farm going and how that went about? Is that too broad of a question?
Yeah. So not really. I think I can handle it.
Okay.
I grew up on this farm with my parents. Actually bought it in 1994, and I was 7. We moved here. Started with some cattle and more conventional, broad acre farming, right? Just the renting out some land for potatoes, growing some salad shops. But then as I graduated from high school and went to university to study mechanical engineering, and at that time, my dad was kind of farming some less land and getting more into organic, as well as the first onion crop. So he kind of started that transition and vegetables, and thought that would be kind of his approach to the future of the farm. But then the opportunity came up for green vegetables, which was entirely not what we had any experience in. But he approached me, and my wife and I, we talked about this. We thought, well, it's definitely an opportunity to get back to the farm, to potentially live there and raise our family there. And that kind of snowballed into where we are. But so that's kind of the initial idea. When we did plan the greenhouse, we did immediately say, well, the farm is organic, and if we're going to grow veggies, we were basically said, hey, let's commit to organic in the soil, and let's go with that. Not so much the hydroponic approach, which is much mainstream, right? Especially there's some larger greenhouses in Alberta here growing veggies. So that was the start, but without any experience, without any without knowing what we're getting into. But I think looking back, that was okay, because we didn't have the, we weren't scared. We weren't looking back. You think, well, boy, that was a lot of work, a lot of stress sometimes, but that's reality. So I think it's good. Learned a lot. We had some really good connections. A crop consultant to really help us out with how to run the crop, and we learned a lot with soil health and nutrition, and just being on the ground, and we're still going today, but not without challenges.
Yeah, Andrew, your video is like I don't know, your connection's really bad. I don't know what's going on. We were fine before we started. Now it's like all choppy. I don't know. This is always the live struggle. Andrew, do you want to try to log back out and log back in, maybe?
I can do that for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, let's try that. All right. So hopefully when Andrew comes back, he'll have a better connection. I don't know. We were chatting for a little while before the show started, and everything was fine. So you just never know with this stuff. Let's get Andrew back in here. All right, Andrew, we got you now?
It looks like it.
Okay. We'll try this again. Yeah, it was
live. There we are.
Yeah. Man, we were chatting for a while, and I was like, everything's going great tonight. And then we have a tough internet connection. We'll give this another go. I heard most of what you were talking about, but all right, so cool. So I want to talk about the greenhouse for a little bit. So you have a very intense greenhouse in that it's climate controlled. You grow basically year round, and I assuming the climate is a little bit cooler where you are. So was that the plan from the beginning to invest in that sort of growing, or was that like something that was added on like a few years in?
No, that was how we approached it initially. We made contact with a few of the greenhouse manufacturers here in Canada, I think actually in Ontario. And this was greenhouse wise, really, if you will, a standard for heated vegetable production. So the greenhouse structure and design build in and of itself isn't so much different than other vegetable greenhouses here, but how we grow inside of it, of course, is very different. But yeah, that was the initial plan. Was this was what we looked at. This was the design considerations with full heating, with boilers, with water, with the double poly, with an energy curtain, and we built it ourselves in 2012, and then 2013 we started our first growing season.
Okay. Andrew, I might have you just can you turn the video off? Is there a way to do that?
I can try. The only thing is I'm not sure my mic is on it.
Is there a turn a video off?
Plug in another.
No. Is there a button to turn your video off in the software?
I've got mute and share screen.
Maybe not.
I don't know. It's just one of the.
Oop. We lost Andrew. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry, guys. If you're still hanging in there, I really appreciate it. We'll try a couple more times. I know it's hard. It's hard for me even to hear Andrew. So we'll see if he can come back. Don't know what to tell you guys. Andrew's got a really cool farm, and one thing is the greenhouse production is incredible. Not just in terms of it's an acre undercover, but a lot of the ways he grows is very different in terms of interplanting and weed management, pest management, all those kinds of things is very different. So I'm really hoping Andrew gets back in and we can talk to him about it. If you guys have any questions, let's see here. Yeah, I know, lots of buffering. Is the buffering coming from me or Andrew? From Andrew, if you guys could chime in there. All right, Andrew. I guess we'll try again.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah, I don't know, Andrew. I mean, a lot of times it's people with rural internet, and we're trying to stream. I don't know. I thought there was a way to turn the video off on your end, but I don't know how to do that from here. So I was asking people in the chat here. Oh, it's Andrew's just okay. They were saying it was buffering. I don't know if it was me or you or both. All right. So, anyways, I was telling everyone that your greenhouse is, very high tech in that it's like extremely climate controlled and everything. But the way you grow in there is different. Can you talk a little bit about like your interplanting and weed management and pest management strategies in there? Because I think it's just a little bit different than I think most people think, especially for large greenhouses.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously the very big difference is we're growing in the soil, and we keep working with that soil, right? We've done soil testing amendments and over the years, and the soil has definitely improved tremendously and is still improving, I think. So that's really off the get-go of greenhouse growing. And when I say greenhouse growing in that term, I'm kind of referring to a lot of the connections in the greenhouse world here are have experienced hydroponic growing, right? So when they first step in, that's the initial take is, wow, like look at the soil. And in that soil and in these plants, we're growing, whether you call it cover crops or banker plants or flowers, we've kind of got a whole mix of things that we either plant or just let regrow over the years, castor beans and different flowers. And we've got some, alyssum in gutters. And so it depends on your take, but it either looks wild or you've got lots of color, lots of things happen, or it's messy or it's weedy, or, everybody has a different take. So yeah, that's, kind of initial thoughts, right? When you step in and you see our place, it's just very different that way. It's not a clean, whitewashed floor type of building. It's let nature do its thing. The soil is there. There's dead plants or dead leaves or prunings on the ground, and there's worms and there's bugs and everything crawling around, and things are, yeah, it's more like nature, right? It's more like we would find something outside, or hopefully that's right, part of the goal.
All right, so
So there's
you
kind
get
of that
incredible
aspect.
you get incredible yields out of there, though. I mean, like, so for everyone who wants to have a tidy greenhouse or tidy beds, like, it's working really well.
Yeah, that's right. It's definitely true. We don't grow only for yield, as you would know. We grow a lot of varieties for taste, flavor, color, for other reasons, because our market is not only about yield. However, yeah, we have had some years, of course, are up and down, as obviously we know as farmers, but yields overall are decent or good. We've had some crops that we've basically reached, I would say, conventional yield numbers, and we're doing it in a very different way. And I would say also that we're in growing season number 9. Initially, in growing season 2, 3, 4, we didn't know if it would get more challenging or where we were going. But now I think, looking back after 9 seasons, we're a lot more confident in saying that the system works. Right, we're on the right path. I don't think. Sure, there's always challenges, but I don't think we're on a trajectory towards failure. Right, that was always the thoughts from other people. Well, after so many years, your soil, you'll have to replace it, or all these worrisome things, which never happen. So I think that's just knowing that your soil is alive and living. And sure, we're not necessarily rotating. We grow a lot of, if you would call it, the same crop, but now we add the mix of other plants, flowers, alfalfa, alfalfa plants, or even just the ginger, turmeric interplantings. It's all something different for the soil and for the soil biology, right? So knowing that all, I don't think we have big worries on where it's going. I do think it's good to stay on your toes and be aware, and try to move crops around and grow different things at different times. But yeah.
Okay, so has it been that strategy from the beginning, or was it kind of like, hey, we'll try to keep it tidy, and then it got a little wild, then you're like, let's just embrace this, like, or is that kind of the strategy from the beginning?
No, this was definitely not what we knew or tried to do at the beginning.
Okay.
Early on, we were growing in the soil, but that was the only plant. So we had tomato vines. Well, we had tomato vines and vine supports, and then bare soil. And then as we got into more of the beneficial insects and their habitats, and what we call banker plants, then we kind of in that, and even a little bit learning or being made aware of regenerative agriculture and those aspects. I think somewhere in year number 3 or so, we kind of meshed the two and said, well, let's try to grow some flowers in the ground, right, in the soil along with the plants. And then some of them reseeded, and you just let it go, and yeah, and at the end of the year, we no longer clean every stick and piece of twig off the ground. You just let things lie, right? We're not about being clean. We're about having everything in balance, which is, you'll have the pest there, but as long as you've got enough good guys, right? It's that approach.
Okay, so it's awesome because I think of, controlled climate greenhouse growing as this, in some ways, very sterile environment with like a lot of hydroponic stuff. But then you think about, like, people are having to spend a lot of money on infrastructure and operating costs and those kinds of things. And you guys are just taking a very different approach. Like, you may hear people saying like, oh, we put some beneficial insects in there, but you don't think of like hedgerows or interplanting beneficial plants and stuff like that. So that's super cool. What are some of the challenges with that? I know you do a lot with beneficial insects, and it sounds like your cover crop system is kind of built in, but what are some of the challenges with this kind of system?
Sure. Definitely on the insects, that's a big one. It's just, there's a lot to learn, a lot of I'm going to say gut feeling, not very scientific. A lot of just needing to have enough experience in a crop and in pest situations or pest versus beneficial situations to make, I'm going to say, instinctive calls on what I need to order or where this is going. Like, am I heading the right direction? Am I still losing the battle? Do I need more good guys? Which ones? That's a whole world on its own almost. And the first few years were rather challenging that way. And I would say now that the last, I think, 3 seasons have been not perfect, but much, much better in terms of overall control, not having any big outbreaks. The biggest challenge we face yet, especially this year as well, was aphid pressure from outside. So just having the right balances in our pepper crop, especially, that's where aphids are an issue. But having the right balances there, but then still struggling because we've got crops outside with aphids like our alfalfa or just, in the general vicinity, and they're floating in and creating more pressure. So in the summer, just being aware of these things, but hard to put it on paper without the experience, right?
Right. Yeah, I can imagine it would take a while. Was there resources for that, or was it kind of just trial and error over the course of many seasons?
There's two main companies in North America that I think both based out of Europe, BioBest and Copper, and they are very good at the biologicals and have some resources and have people, and now it's online ordering and such like that. So yeah, definitely wasn't on my own, but I'm the one, or myself and my crew in the crop daily and weekly, and so you're the one that needs to make the call and really grasp the situation. Somebody who comes in, even if I can get somebody out every couple of weeks, it's not enough, right, to make the calls, and well, things can happen a lot faster than that.
Right.
The big challenge too with the beneficials is they're great, but I order on a Wednesday for delivery the next Tuesday or Wednesday, and a lot of them will still need to hatch, or they're in their life cycle. So anything, you're kind of like at least a week, but more like 10 days to even 2 weeks from more activity, and then they will go in the crop and or attack the pest and keep the process going. So there's that time lag. That's what you have to be. When I see something in my crop, I need to think kind of that 2 weeks away rather than what I need immediately today.
Right. So you have to preemptively sort of put the thing out that you think is going to exist in a week or week and a half.
Correct. And some of that works well. There's in our cucumbers, the largest issue we have is thrips. So there's a beneficial mite called Swirsky that works against thrips, but the cucumbers do not have pollen. So the company I buy from, called BioBest, they supply a pollen. So we release these mites into the crop, and then once a week we blow pollen in with a little cordless blower. And that way the mite can live on the pollen, but is also established there before the pest arrives or before the pest numbers increase. So this way we have a system kind of being built in or grown on the plant before the problem arises. And if we do that correctly, then we do not have a problem all year. So that's the ideal situation.
Wow. I feel like, man, we could talk about this for like hours. I'm so fascinated by this stuff, but I got to I got to switch gears a little bit. And before we do that, I was going to ask you about this anyways, but the question is about the quail, because I guess someone else had listened to the podcast you did with Jesse. So you brought in some quail to handle the pill bugs. How's that going? Like, are you continuing with that strategy? And like, what's that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So initially, which was about 2.5 years ago now, then it was kind of a last-ditch effort, or it's a just try something approach, and it seemed like it would work. And they're a small enough bird; they don't really interfere, they don't get in the way, they don't make a big mess. They're really kind of in the woodworks, and so that seemed to work fairly well. but I don't think we had the numbers. So starting last year, I got a few more, but then this spring I made a connection with a local um, fellow doing quail as a hobby, and I actually made a connection with him and got him to do some incubation for me, and I brought in, I think it was about 75 total, and yeah, great results. So when they come from incubation, they're about, I think, 3 weeks old. They're fairly young. They're like hungry teenagers. So I think it was the right timing with my young crops too. It was like in March. And they really do and just stay under crop, getting the pill bugs. So definitely seems to be working, and we've also seen this summer that we're getting some mating, some natural activity. So I don't know for sure where we're at on numbers, but at some point this may be just kind of a self-sustaining if there's enough, they might if there's more food, they might grow more. If there's not enough food, I'm not sure. I think a few may leave through an open door here or there, but for the rest, they're happy, and they seem to be doing well.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. I had a question about it too, so I'm glad someone else asked. So I feel like we could talk about greenhouse stuff for hours, but you have a lot else going on the farm. So you have a lot of field production. You said garlic, onions, melons, stuff like that. But one thing I want to talk to you about is scale, because most of the growers that I'm talking to are super small. So can you talk a little bit about what it's like, running a larger, well, not a large farm, but larger than most of I think the people listening to this, and sort of your approach with wholesale? I know you say you don't do farmers markets and stuff like that. So what's that like? What are the challenges and stuff like that? If you could talk on like wholesale farming a little bit.
Sure. I think I'll start maybe with the angle of when we started the farm, when we came back to the farm and building of the greenhouse. It was already then we said, really, the farmers market approach, it's a big commitment. It's a lot of Saturdays. As I mentioned to you earlier, I now have 6 kids. No one here was really that interested in committing the Saturday, which, the home from school day. We don't do any work on Sundays. So the Saturday thing we wanted to keep open, and we just said, you know what, no farmers markets. And that's just kind of the line since then. And sometimes you think, well, am I missing something? But on the other hand, we focus our efforts or different things on being wholesale, and it is working. And I think retailing is effort, and it takes time. And some people really love it, and I don't know if any of us are the really love it kind of people. So then let's do what we love, which is the farming. So that's kind of our angle on the what or the why. However, we're in a sense plenty big too. We've said, an acre of greenhouse, the field crops we have between 8 to 10 full-time employees. My mom, my dad, myself are all actively involved. So relative to that, sometimes you think, well, there's a fair bit of stress, a fair bit of things to handle, and we feel we're plenty large. And for what, right? Sometimes it's the question, well, why are we so big? We could be probably just as happy if we were doing something smaller. So there's that, balance in life aspect. But for us, we have a direct connection with most of our customers, like the store managers or people putting in the order. So we're not just wholesaling to a distributor. We do have connections with, various, I'm going to say, small, locally owned natural food stores. Some of them have a couple of locations in our major centers here. So that's so yes, we're wholesale, but we are dealing a little bit closer to the consumer, or at least we're dealing with the end retailer. And we still grow a bit of a variety. So we find that to try to be effective is, if we're selling cucumbers, then a store may take, for example, 120 long English cucumbers a week. But we also grow mini cucumbers, so then it's 90 bags of those, and it's now 30 pounds of beefsteak tomatoes, and then TOV, grape tomatoes, red peppers, yellow peppers, bell peppers, hot peppers, throw on a crate of garlic. Oh, we've got cantaloupe. So it's that that variety where we try to turn these sales into, okay, now we have a couple of $1,000s going to each store per week. So yes, there's scale to it, and that's not always handy because you have um, a big a big thing to keep going, right? If you know what
Right.
I'm saying, it's kind of a you got a big operation and you got to keep it rolling right in the right direction, hopefully. Um, so that part, I think, of the being big, there's negatives too. We've sometimes been concerned if one of our, like, let's say we have 6 or 8 customers and that's most of our sales, and what happens when we lose the biggest one or one of the bigger ones, right? Or they decide to go somewhere else. There's that negative aspect of excuse me, of that happening, and then we're fairly finely balanced with what we produce to what we can sell, or historically where our sales are at. So the challenge of meeting the demand without overshooting and needing to find a place for a product.
Okay, but there's also the challenges of managing people and labor and making sure everything's covered in that, like, if you were smaller, let's say, like, maybe it's more simple, but you I don't know. I'm sure you debate this stuff all the time. And I think there's different issues at different scales. So it's cool to hear about that, but it's got to feel good to feed that many people. Like, you're producing a lot of food, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is. I agree 100%. That's it feels really good, and it feels really great when people come by, you have family, friends, or somebody stops in to visit or say hi, and you toss them a few cantaloupes or whatever, right? That's just a prime example because they're so great when they're fresh. But some fresh food, and they say, well, that's not what I came here for. I said, no, but that's the beauty of being a farmer, right? That's what we love to do. And so, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. The challenges of managing labor, that's a big one. When it goes good, it's great. We've had good crew, can't complain. Everybody pulls their weight. And then if one person is gone out of 8, is sometimes not so bad because one person gone out of 2, well, you lost half your workforce, right? One person gone out of 8 or 10, well, everybody else can pull an extra 10% and we make it through. So I've sometimes looked at the increased labor force as being a benefit that way. Um, but yeah, there's days too when we harvest garlic and we process it where suddenly you need 10 extra people, and then this year the melons came off at the same time as garlic, so it was just you're absolutely swamped, and where do you find that many extra helpers? So yeah, there's challenges.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think about that benefit of, like, if one per like if I hurt myself, I'm the only farmer. So, like, there's no farming getting done there. All right, very cool. All right, so I want to ask you one other thing, and then I'll take some questions because we've been chatting for a while. But I know that one of the new things that you have going on is you guys are starting to produce caterpillar tunnels. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So last year we saw all of the interest in home growing in market gardeners or people wanting to maybe get out of a career and grow food, right? Local centers. And I'm all about that. So we thought, hey, would it not be an opportunity to design and get into some Canadian manufacturing of caterpillar tunnels? So we kind of spent the winter doing some designing and a little bit of hands-on testing and whatnot, and launched our brand this spring, which is called Grow Hoops. And haven't pushed sales too hard, put a few up ourselves. Have a cousin of mine growing here. He's running them. Got another local sale, and we shipped a few off in Alberta here, but fairly small scale, getting them out, getting them tested, getting some feedback. But the idea is that, yeah, we thought we're in a windy climate here, so at least for southern Alberta, maybe we can provide another option. And it seems like there's also some demand from homeowners and acreage people with homesteading, right? How can we grow a little bit more of our own food? And we love these little structures. So it's a work in progress, and it's some new challenges. So we've learned, and I think it's definitely working. And even for me, it's actually an eye opener because I've never grown in something in between the extreme, like field growing with nothing or fully heated. So this is actually a new world of growing for me. And I think, well, we're not necessarily looking for more work, but I do think there's a fit even on our farm for for them.
That's awesome. I think it's super cool to hear about more of this stuff, especially where, if someone can get these tunnels that are closer to you and doesn't have to get shipped as far. And I think obviously when I think Caterpillar tunnels, I think of like Farmer's Friend, and they've been a supporter of this channel, my channel, and supporting growers all over the place. And like they couldn't make them fast enough this year, so like having more accessible to people is awesome. I'm a huge fan of Caterpillar tunnels. I'm growing 100% under Caterpillar tunnels, and it's they're so beneficial. Like I grow 2 times what I could grow outside for sure in a tunnel. It's crazy just like by covering it. So that's super cool. Hopefully people can check that out and check out this cool stuff you guys are doing. All right. I just wanted to ask you about that because I haven't heard of anyone else making that style tunnels. So it's cool to hear about it. Anyways, you have anything else you want to add about the tunnels or?
No, I think, like I mentioned to you a little earlier, it was just a challenge this year with supplies issues and whatnot. But yeah, feel free to check out the website and a little bit of information. And like I said, we're still learning, but we thought it's, like you say, if we can provide an extra opportunity for growers around here. We see so much of expensive land and big equipment and everything. And I think it's, why don't we have more small farmers, right? Why don't we have more of these growers by the centers growing food? Sure, we're farther north, but we can grow lots of food here. So let's do it.
Yeah, there's also a huge demand I found in the like homes gardening, homesteading space because people realize the benefit. And if you're really serious about growing food for your family, like having a tunnel, like you can grow so much food in one little tunnel. It's mind blowing. And obviously season extension, all that stuff. So, all right. We got a couple questions from our Patreon members. So the first one here is from Ben Parks. How have you marketed your current branding to differentiate yourself from regular growers? Wholesome, nutrient-dense food while improving soil health, things like that. I know you guys are certified organic, but what are some ways that you've used, you marketed your products?
Yeah. I would say that we've really been strong on that our product is certified organic because that's the initial, I'm going to say, already market recognized division. And we were going into a market where there was not, I'm going to say, local or Alberta grown certified organic vegetables. So we were more, I'm going to say, displacing a product that would have come from Mexico or somewhere else in terms of the customers we have. So from that perspective, being certified organic is what differentiated us from the conventional or the hydroponic produce. Now, in 9 years, of course, our learning and our advancement, if you will, in regenerative and soil health and focusing so much on the nutrition of the crop and what's in the crop has grown a lot. And I think that's really come or we've passed it on, I think, through messaging. Just we've tried to invite the produce managers down to the farm to get a hands on what we're doing. I've gone to visit them. I've done little presentations, but little in a sense of any other any other brands or any other recognitions or whatever. We're just really wanting to put a good product out in the market and it will sell itself. And I think actually on that topic, garlic is a good one to bring up. The local garlic market has really been growing, but we have a large customer with a number of stores, and they used to sell Chinese garlic, which is cheap, but they started bringing in some of ours. And once the customer has a taste of that, they come back and ask for more. So once that happens, once you start that, it's like a little bit of a chain reaction. And a few years later, they're our largest customer, and we can't sell them enough garlic. So, and this is not an organic store. This is just, I'm going to say, a regular grocery store. So that just goes to show that I think there's demand for local produce, and people realize or see the quality, the taste, the flavor, shelf life, and once that gets out there, then becomes attached to your name. So I think just trying to stay strong on our name and the product we have out there that is consistently, hopefully, high quality, and that's not always easy, right? We run into little snags and we run into challenges. I always like to point that out, right? As much as we've learned and as much as I love regenerative ag and soil growing, doesn't mean there's not challenges. And overall, it goes good, but there certainly are challenges and when we run into issues. So staying on your toes and being focused, but just backing up your product, being confident in with what you are and what you produce and the why, and being willing to share and open.
Cool. And I think it always comes down to relationships, like with your customers. Like it sounds like that was the first thing was like, let's have good relationships. Let's let people understand what we're doing. Let's bring them to the farm and then they can sell it for us essentially, as long as we're producing like quality content, quality produce, not content. We're talking about content right now.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. That's we've used the term before that the when I say our customers, I'm usually referring to the retailers or the produce managers or
right.
people who are working behind our produce. And yes, we've said before that there are ambassadors for our produce, right? If they come to our farm and they get a bit of a taste of what and why and see what we do and get their hands on it, then when they're in the store, they now have more of a connection and more of an ability to answer questions or to be even proud of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they'll be like, hey, I was just there and hey, the onion's going to be ready in a couple weeks. You really got to get those when they come in, like all those kinds of things. I always tell people if you can get, because I sell to chefs, if you can ever get a chef out to your farm, like you're good. Like they're gonna be like psyched to buy food from you. They're going to tell everyone they work with in the kitchen, their customers, like that's what you want. You want that direct connection. That's what you're after for sure. All right, let me ask you another question here. Aries Slicker says, how are you determining when to irrigate? Are you using soil moisture sensors such as tensiometers or just by feel? Also, do you manage the irrigation cycles of each crop differently or more or less the same? I guess there's a lot of things to answer in that question.
Yeah, that's all right. So we are based mostly on light. So we have our climate control system, we have a weather station, and we have a light meter, and our irrigation cycles, which are different for each crop. So they are different for tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers. Between each of them, they are all individually based on light. So we have set points on how much light energy in joules, and every time we reach the set point for each crop, it triggers an irrigation. Now I can adjust the irrigation, the length of time, but that's our main input is based on light. Now I do adjust that as the season goes on. So there again, I am actually playing with some tensiometers now, but I don't have enough experience yet. I am not too much basing any irrigations on that, but I will go through the crops by hand, checking in the soil, getting an idea of overall moisture content, how the crop is doing, and then I will go back to the irrigation control computer and make adjustments if needed in the set points. But then the day-to-day set points are based on light. So at least if we get a sunny day or a cloudy day, there's kind of an automatic adjustment based on the light we're getting.
That's super cool. Is that common in greenhouse growing? Sorry, I don't know if you heard that, Andrew. Is that common in greenhouse growing? That seems super cool.
Sorry, you did cut out there for a minute, or I cut out.
Yeah, either way. I was asking, like, based on light makes a lot of sense in a greenhouse where everything else is held constant, but the light is changing. Is that common to use light sensors for irrigation? I never heard of that before.
I think it is actually quite common in commercial greenhouse growing, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have any previous experience. It was just how we got started by based on a lot of input from the company who's designed and built our control system, and yeah, it works well.
Very cool. All right. What about field crops? Is that like what sort of system do you use for that?
Yeah. So onions and garlic, we have center pivot irrigation. So which is, I mean, in southern Alberta here, if it wasn't for irrigation, we wouldn't have much for crops. So we're very, very dependent on irrigation. And we have some of the largest irrigation districts in the world. But So yeah, for our what we call broad acre crops on those under the same system, basically it rolls over top of the crop and overhead waters. And for the squash and the melons, we do a plastic mulch system with a drip tape.
Okay, so is that mostly like you guys just manage that, or is it like based on sensors and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I guess the mechanical engineering is coming out here, Andrew.
No, yeah, the field irrigation is very much based on just hands-on management, checking, and then the center pivots. Of course, we can adjust for how much, like we want a half an inch of water or 3/4 inch or whatever, and then it just it does its thing over a day or two, however big your piece is or how much you want to put on. But yeah, no sensors or anything high tech there on the field crops. The
Okay.
back to the greenhouse irrigation. I'm not sure if the question was related to that as much. We started out using drip lines with emitters and a lead and a drip stake, where we would put one by each plant. But this year we've actually gone to running 3 rows of a drip tape down what we call each bed. And our reasoning for that is, well, two things. One is the cost of that drip system with the leads is expensive, and we were getting biofilm issues with clogging, especially after a few years. So replacing that was fairly costly, a lot of plastic. So the drip tape is a lot less plastic, and using 3 rows of it, we get a lot more even distribution over the soil. So it's the first year we've done it, and there's definitely some positives, but it's getting plants started and a few other things. There are some challenges with it as well.
Okay. When you said you just made when you said what we call beds, what do you mean by that? Are your beds not like recognizable to people?
Well, I think they are. I guess it's just there's 1 row of crop on it, and it's between the pipe rails in our greenhouse. So I guess the bed is maybe a loose term, but yeah, it's 30 some inches wide, so I guess it would be fairly standard for you.
Oh, okay. So what do the walkways look like in the greenhouse?
Yeah, so we
Are there
have
walkways?
pipe rail. We have pipe rail heating. So there's
Okay.
actually steel pipe that's on the ground, which function as heating pipes, but also function as a basically a train track for hand harvest carts or our electric scissor carts where we do our crop work on. And they're I think it's 22 inches. It's 55 centimeters, anyways. And we can walk in between those, but they're suspended off the ground about 6 inches. Those pipes. So yeah, that's it's a straight track in between, and then our crops hang from crop support wires that are about 15 feet off the ground, and that's where we do our crop work. So those rails function then as heating for pumping hot water through from the boiler, as well as the railroad tracks for driving up and down.
Okay. Cool. Let's say I got a question here. What's your process to successfully dry onions? Do you have a designated drying or curing shed, or do you let them dry in the field?
Yeah, we do some of both. So we actually will, with our onion digger, which is a slightly modified potato harvester, we will actually lift them. Well, first we come with a topper. So we have basically a giant mower, and we come and try to cut as much of the tops off as we can, shred them up. And then we come and we lift the onions out and drop them back on the ground in what we call like a small windrow, just in a 1 layer thick but 2 feet wide or so. And then if we can, we'll give them about a week or a week and a half of laying out, hopefully in dry weather, because we're doing this quite late in our season. Like we haven't even done that yet, and we're getting towards our first frost here is forecasted for this week. So we do that late in the season, but then hopefully with some good drying weather, they get a bunch of the moisture knocked off, and then we'll come with the same digger, and instead of laying them back in the field, we load them in our macro bins, and then the macro bins go into actually our multi-purpose area of our greenhouse, which is concrete floor and is used for propagation and other things in the spring, but it's empty in the fall. We use that to stack our onions in, and we have a 10 horsepower fan where we actually pull the air through for another 2 weeks or so to finish curing. But we're talking 7.5 acres or so of onions, so a very significant volume there.
Yeah. Do you use the same system for garlic too?
Mostly, yeah. We don't lay them in the field, but the same multi-purpose greenhouse area with the macro bins and the forced air. Yes.
Okay. Very cool. Let's see here. I guess this is a follow-up to the irrigation. Are you irrigating with municipal water, or do you have an alternative water source? You're on well water, those kinds of things.
Yeah. So as part of our irrigation district, there's a large network of canals and reservoirs and pipelines in our area, and our property is next to one of the small buffer reservoirs. So we're actually pumping irrigation water directly from the irrigation network, and we have a dugout. So for off-season use, we have enough of our own water storage. But it's all irrigation water, which actually comes from snow melt in the Rocky Mountains. That's our initial source.
Okay. The question here is, where are you guys located? Can you let everyone know where you are? I mean, you said Alberta. I don't even
Yeah.
most of our viewers are probably in the States, but
Sure. So we're in Coaldale, Alberta, which is about 2 hours south of Calgary, for those who know where Calgary is, and we're about an hour and a half north of the Montana border. So we're about 2.5 hours from Great Falls, I think, maybe 3 hours.
okay. Question here: have you ever considered doing a CSA? I know you mentioned not wanting to do farmers market, but have you looked at any of the other sort of options in terms of sales outlets?
We haven't done much of that. However, when COVID first came around last year, we actually did seriously stop for a day or two and think about doing some more of that CSA, or just people could order a box or that type of thing. It seemed like with the initial lockdowns, there was some more of that need. I think what actually happened was there was people maybe in our retail stream, if you want to call it that, that I think did those transitions. So we never did. It just, we've still talk about, do we open the farm up for a day a week or something? We just, like I mentioned earlier, it's not really our key thing. And where do we start, right? We've always had this line, okay, we don't retail, right? We wholesale, and we have got retailers, which if you really want something, go there. So.
Okay. And then how did that play out last year? I know we were talking just beforehand that you had a great year. So obviously the decision worked out, right?
We were quite concerned because with all the restaurants closing, we do have a distributor who buys from us who sells to restaurants, and we thought, well, if that's 10% of our sales, or 15%, that's probably about where it was between that. If that disappears, that's a whole bunch of product where we don't know what to do with. Excuse me. But what happened was, I think people still need to eat, which we seem to miss that fact for a little while. You think, well, the restaurants are all closed. Where does that produce go? Everybody still needs to eat. So I think between some, corner stores and different places kind of buying more, or doing some, online ordering, and you can pick up your box once a week, everything went. And it was just a sold out show. So we didn't have to do much pivoting ourselves, but the streams kind of changed and the volumes changed. But at the end of the day, no regrets in making a decision that we were not doing any of it, and all the product moved. So
cool. Yeah, there was definitely a panic at the beginning of last season because of that, with the timing with COVID. But yeah, you got to remember, people still got to eat. And also during this period, shipping food was harder. And so local food became more important, which it should have been anyways. But like, people are like, oh, the shelves are empty. Like, what about the farms near us? So that's awesome that worked out and you guys had a big season. I want to talk a little bit about, unless you guys have more questions in the chat, it doesn't look like they have too many more, some of the field growing stuff, because I know you mentioned a good chunk of your land is in cover crops. So can you talk a little about your cover crop strategy and how that works in with your field growing?
Sure. So mostly of our cover crop strategy at this point is we spend a full year ahead of our onions and our garlic in cover crops. And our strategy at this point has mostly been that we seed a approximately 15 to 20 species mix in May, and we let that grow until mid to later July. Terminate that biomass with a rototiller, give it a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks to die and have some breakdown from the worms and all the soil biology. And then we seed again with a less diverse mix of crops that we know will be killed by the winter, because we don't have any, being organic, we don't have any herbicide options, and we don't want to till before winter. So that we just make sure that the cover crop we're seeding end of July, early August is all of the species in there won't mature before winter, but will be killed by our winters. So that's kind of our general strategy. And it's a little bit of a soil health, soil fertility, but also initially was that hopefully that will set us up for cleaner fields on the weed pressure end, especially in onions. And this year that seems to have backfired on us. We seeded our second crop, cover crop, earlier last year, and we had buckwheat go to seed, and we had some weeds in there actually go to seed. And I'm not sure if that was all of it, but we had a lot of weed pressure in onions this year, and it was a real challenge. We lost a couple of acres of onion crop. We couldn't keep clean enough. We had to till it in. So.
Okay, so is that an every other year situation?
Not really. Like, we have enough acres yet that we're kind of we're farming in a circle because our center pivots are circular, and we're taking a piece of the pie and kind of stepping it up every year. If you can follow that, kind of we're taking a new piece of the pie every year. So it's not that we're coming back and forth, but we're just trying to have all of the acres going into veggies have a year of cover crop ahead of that. And there could be some other cover crop in between or something else, but that's kind of the general strategy, is at least that year before to try do what we can for the soil and hopefully against the weed pressure and hopefully keep ourselves away from as much work on hand weeding and such.
Okay. So like how many rotations of veggies does it get before it gets hit with cover crops, do you think?
Yeah, so before the garlic we do that, and then as soon as the garlic is harvested, it's harvested in early August here. So then as soon as that's harvested, we can come in with cover crop again because we have enough time.
Okay.
So in that example, we can come back fairly quick. In the onions, it's very late in the year, and we'll try seed something just for trying to prevent erosion with our winds in the winter, but it doesn't get much time to establish. So that's a challenge. And then what we've been doing lately is actually going into our onion field the next year with our plastic mulch and our squash and melons, because the onions have a fairly dark soil, right? There's not as much residue. And so that's actually nice conditions for laying plastic mulch and drip tape and working with those crops. While as going after wheat or something that has more residue, you get all your holes in your black plastic, and it's just a little more challenging. So that's kind of been the process there. And then after that, it depends. We've gone in either with spring wheat or back to cover crop. We're actually going into a little bit of alfalfa as a perennial legume this year. We're trying that again, just on a few acres.
Cool. And so maybe this is a silly question, but what does the geometry look like for your beds if you're using a center pivot? Like, how is that laid out?
Yeah, we try to usually just pick the longest side of the pie, which doesn't sound like it makes sense, but our we don't always go. Our beds aren't necessarily aligned with one side. We'll go across, or we'll kind of I guess maybe pick the most appropriate angle so that we get long enough beds relative. And sometimes, of course, the pie is bigger or smaller depending on how many acres we're growing. So if we have only 4 acres, then it's a fairly narrow long piece. But if it's 15 acres, now it's suddenly quite a large piece. So then it is a lot better with bed lengths. But our longest beds are about 800 feet ish.
Okay. Yeah, so it's pretty much impossible to standardize things if you're growing in a circle.
That part is a bit of a challenge for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And what about like compost? I know you want to talk a little bit about some of the compost stuff you have going on.
Yeah. So what we've done, I'll kind of split it up into 2 parts. One, I'll start with the field stuff. So we have done some composting with chicken manures and beef feedlot based bedding here, even with some wood chips, and spread that out. We don't largely base our field fertility on compost, but we've done that in the past, and actually our overall nutrition on our field soils is quite good. It's actually at a really nice balanced level, and I think we've seen some good results now the past few years with growing our even our wheat crops, kind of going away from the veggies, but just seeing pretty good nutrition in the crop with the sap testing that we do, and not seeing a need for continued compost applications. So that kind of, we'll do some tweaking. We'll do some foliar spraying on veggies. We'll do a little bit of liquid fish if we need it through irrigation or some micronized gypsum, but on a smaller volume scale. But then in the greenhouse, I actually haven't used a animal-based compost since the first year we started, but we do use quite a lot of vermicompost that's used by a really good company here in our local town. And what we've done this year is we struggle with potassium uptake especially in tomatoes. And so to work on addressing that, I thought, well, it's hard to put some of these sources of potassium on the soil throughout the year because it's not really friendly in a raw form to the soil biology, right? We have sunflower hull ash, which is a very good potassium source, but you can't really just put a layer of it on the soil and expect things to happen. So we worked with the local vermicomposters, and they actually used it as an ingredient in their food stock to the worms. And what we did is feeding it at the initial stage of compost allowed us to really change the final result from a relatively low potassium vermicompost to a nicely balanced or even more potassium than calcium vermicompost, which we now can put on our soil, which is immediately uptaken or rooted into by the plants, right? The plants love vermicompost. So that's kind of a strategy there, right? Is instead of taking kind of your raw minerals and using them in your soil or trying to add them throughout the season, if you have them blended into a biological form, then the uptake is quicker and biology is a lot happier.
Man, I just love the way you're thinking about this. And so we're talking about custom vermicompost, vermicast, whatever, just to like basically have the biology work before you even put it into the ground. So that's really cool. What about testing? I mean, you mentioned like sap analysis, and are you still doing a lot of that testing?
Yes. Yeah. So should have probably mentioned it earlier, but that's probably the key to all of the nutrition and all of the crop going here is sap analysis. So every 3 weeks, I'm sending samples off to Holland for sap analysis. I deal directly with Nova Crop Control, and so yeah, I do approximately 120 samples a year, and that's what gives kind of, I call it if you will, the fingertip control. Send off the samples on Monday, get the results Friday morning. Friday, we're typically already addressing the first or the largest concerns with foliar spray or liquid injection. And then, of course, 3 weeks later, you repeat the procedure. And the thing with the sap analysis is gives you so much information in one time. And now with 5 years of experience with them, it's definitely the big tool. It really shows what you see in the crop, or what's coming, and when things are good in the crop, or when you look at a crop and you think, wow, this crop is doing great, the sap analysis, well, you'll see it already. Or vice versa. This year I'm struggling with mildew again, and you can see those challenges coming in a sap analysis. Not saying it's always easy to address, but I think it can definitely help you address things earlier, like before they're as big of a problem, or before they cost you more yield, or health on the plant, or those things. So
Wow.
I'm
Okay.
definitely a really big proponent.
Okay. And doing that over, let's say, more traditional like soil analysis. You like that a lot better than doing just like normal soil analysis? Andrew, you there? Andrew, you still with us? I guess Andrew's going to come back. Maybe Andrew will come back and we'll take a couple more questions. If you guys have questions in the chat, please get them in. I really apologize about the connections this evening. There's just the reality of connecting with growers all around the world, and rural internet connections and all that kind of stuff. My internet's not great, but I do live in the suburbs, so it's decent. We'll try to get Andrew back in here. So hopefully there's a bunch of you guys still in here hanging out. Hope you're enjoying this conversation. And if you guys do have any questions, that'd be great if you guys get them in. And yeah, just looking through some of the questions here. Andrew's coming back in. All right, Andrew. Hopefully we got you back.
There we are. Yep.
All right. Cool. What I was asking you, and maybe we'll try to wrap up soon, just because I don't know when the internet's going to go out again. So, you prefer the SAP analysis over sort of traditional soil sampling?
I think we're kind of cutting out a little already. Yeah, I definitely prefer SAP analysis. I think it's a stronger tool. It gives a lot of information, and it's really it's all dialed into what the plant wants. So soil analysis are a tool, but there's so many varied conditions on current conditions of that soil. What's the biology like, temperature, water content, and I think there's a lot of things happening that may change, nutrient availability from day to day. What's the pH of the root exudate? Like, what's the so I think kind of going to the plant and being more of like, okay, what does the plant want, or what's the current conditions of the plant? Because that doesn't always seem to be a correlation to the soil in terms of, I don't think you can answer those problems with a soil test. I just think there's not enough information there. There's too many things happening in between. So taking these results from the plant allows for that extra, close contact, or extra dialing in of, even micronutrients. For example, I'll say that manganese is a micronutrient that we seem to have plenty of in our soil, and even on biologically active soil we seem to get enough of it happening, but yet we don't get enough in the plant. So it's one of the micronutrients I almost always have to foliar spray additional manganese to keep that up, and that's a big player in relationship with potassium and for example strength against powdery mildew. So lots of little interactions there, and we've seen a lot of good results with foliar spraying nutrients to address what we see on SAP analysis.
Very cool, Andrew. I feel like we could go into all these things a lot more in depth, but hopefully people get a little bit of a sense of all the cool stuff you got going on. And I really appreciate your time tonight. I apologize again for the connection, but I'm just so glad you could join us this evening. And is there anything else you want to add before we try to wrap things up?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's been a good talk, and like you say, there's always more to talk about. Maybe sometime I'll have better internet. I'm not sure what's happening tonight, but thanks for having me, and Yeah, you know what? If people are interested, I think they can look at our website, our Man's Organics, or check out the social media. I'm not super faithful and detailed on that, but gives you a little bit of an idea and had some history there on what all happens on the farm. So always people can reach out and ask any questions or stop by if you're in the area.
Sounds great, Andrew. I have those. All that stuff is linked in the video description. So I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate the knowledge that you give out and the help that you're providing. So, and all the food you're growing for your local community. So, thanks again for coming on tonight, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Hey guys, big thanks to Andrew for coming on tonight. And again, big apologies for the technical difficulties. This is always, I find, to be the issue with interviewing farmers in rural areas and all that kind of stuff. But again, I appreciate all you guys a ton. And if you did miss the beginning of the show tonight, just a reminder or an announcement that I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break from Growers Live. I've been doing this show every other Tuesday night for over a year. The streak started in July of 2020. I also did a bunch of shows in the fall, winter of 2019 to 2020. Some great guests and some unbelievable conversations, and I valued it immensely. I had no idea. There was no goal in like how long to do this for, but we were just like, let's just keep doing it. So it's been awesome. So all these shows are still available on the YouTube, on the Growers, No-Till Growers YouTube channel, and it's also available in podcast form. Just look up Growers Live in any podcast listener that you guys like, and you can listen to all those conversations. I really appreciate all of your support, and as of now, I don't have a timeline for coming back, but I just need to take a break because I have a lot of other things going on with No-Till Growers, all of my YouTube work, videography, and of course, farming. So thank you guys so much for coming out tonight, and we'll see you guys soon.